I'm gonna be painting Makoto Kino from Sailor Moon in this video that is sponsored by CA3D Studio. Before we get started, the printer that I used is the GK3 Pro, and for the clear resin I used the Uniformations clear resin that they have, the new crystal clear one, and for the grey resin it is Sunlu standard with a little mix of ABS like from Sunlu, just because it's cheap resin. If you notice the timeline on the bottom of this video, you'll know that it only took me 47 seconds to print and prepare this model for painting. I'm now going to spray over the top of this model with a white ink to give it a volumetric highlight before going into painting the main color, which is the green. And the green for me, I feel like needs to have a certain sheen to it. So I use some fairy dust, which is basically a metallic medium mixed in, to make the green like metallic. I use contrast paints because there are thinner paints, but they are a lot more saturated in color, and I use these to add shadows into a lot of the pieces that I paint. And it wasn't long before I had to start painting the skin tones, and for the skin tones I essentially always start off with a color that I like to call pinkle. Now this is obviously not pink, nor is it purple, it is clearly pinkle. I then use red ink because red is such a bright color, but in the ink form it is super pungent, and this helps to tint the black and also create a lovely shade of gradient of mauve between the two colors. Now it may seem like I'm a little bit crazy and going between things left, right and center, but what I'm actually doing is painting things as they dry. So while those parts for the skin tone can dry, I'm going to start working on the base of the model, and I'm going to start dry brushing everything. You may notice that I put a little bit of brown down first, and this is to create some brown, obviously, in the shadows. I mean, it's pretty obvious if you think about it. Some of the shades from Citadel make some incredible shadow colors, and they dry, well, most of them dry fairly matte. This particular one, Agrax, does not like to, but because I'm going to use some Drakenhof in certain areas, it will kind of disguise the fact that Agrax is a little bit shiny. However, these colors do help to tint things and just add an extra flare of color on top of your base. This video was sponsored by CA3D Studios. This is a Patreon over on Patreon where you get models just like this one, as well as many others, and from some incredible sculptors for you to 3D print and paint in your house. This month, actually, they are running a contest over on their Patreon whereby if you paint one of their models, you could have the chance of winning $1,500. Genuinely, it's crazy. So if you are interested, or even remotely have a slight of your brain turned on, go check out the description for a link. Go join the competition. What can it hurt? At the end of the day, you might win $1,500. So go check it out right now. I say it in every video and I will say it again. I absolutely hate masking, but this model required me to mask on account of some of the things that needed to be painted. Now, of course, the first thing I masked was just to mask off the green so that I didn't get any of the pink that I needed to spray on the bow onto it. Now, at this point, I'm adding on a fluorescent color over the top to make that pink brighter because I didn't like it. However, I had to do more masking, of course, because there is some skin tones that needed to be painted right in the middle of all that green and pink that I had previously painted. So I'm gonna mask it off and just get straight onto painting my skin tones. Before I leave you to vibe with the epic music while I paint these skin tones, a little trick when you are painting skin tones is to thin your paints down way more than you ever thought you would need to, and build it up a little bit over time, because you'll get a much better look out of it like that. Trust me, just do it, thin it down more than you thought, and thank me later. When I get to a point where I feel like the skin tones are skin toning, I need to obviously add a really bright highlight to that, but when I do, it tends to make it too desaturated, so I spray a yellow tint over the top of all of it to bring back some of that saturation again, otherwise it looks a little bit, dare I say, crap. For the whites on this lady's outfit, I'm going to use deck tan, and I can paint this in like 3 layers to make sure that it is a solid deck tan color before I can come back and add a shadow into this with the color that's not going to ruin all my other colors. I do have a really cool technique to show you though. I printed this in transparent resin and I sprayed only the back, not the front of the little heart. I sprayed the back of it with that really bright green, and then I put a transparent clear coat over the top, a gloss finish, and it literally gives it the coolest look. You'll see it a little bit later in the video, but for now I need to go back and fix up the fact that I hate masking because I didn't mask it properly, because who has the time for masking anyway? Now while I set about putting in the shadows into this deck tan, or technically white shirt that I have on this lady, I would like for you to notice that I have made a terrible mistake. You may not know what this mistake is unless you of course know this character, and I will only let you know what that mistake is when I get round to it. So for the shadows, what I did was I used the Apothecary white, but I felt like this was not pungent enough and just didn't have enough contrast between the lightest color and the darkest of the shadows. So I ended up using a Griff Charger Grey to really push those shadows a little bit more. So I printed the powers that is coming out of this lady's hands, and obviously into the ground as well, in a transparent resin. This is because I want to keep this clear for when I actually come around to giving it a slight tint of blue so that it looks like power. I don't really know how to explain this, but also I had a struggle with the whole fact that the power is inside of her hand, meaning that I would have to mask that area, and I absolutely hate masking. So what I decided to do was just paint the center of the power white, because essentially this is the brightest point of where the power is coming from, and so to make it not look weird, I painted the connection points of that power with a white and a fade to the transparent resin on the end. Hopefully that makes sense, but hopefully the pictures that you're seeing on your screen is what helping to make it make sense. Now of course I then dry brushed the little rocks on that little bottom piece of power exactly the same as I did the base, and then I set to work using this Talisar blue just in the tips and around the edges of this transparent section before spraying it with a gloss clear coat in order to make it nice and shiny. at this point I was blissfully unaware of the problem that I had created by not doing a certain thing, and I only noticed when I saw one of my own Patreons post this model that they had painted. And of course I had forgotten that this lady is wearing white gloves. So this means that I need to go back in and try my best to put this deck tan, which is the same color as her shirt, over the top of everything. I need to be careful not to let it go onto the power in her hand, because of course that is not deck tan color and it needs to be brighter than the color of her arms, otherwise it would look weird. And of course I need to shade this as well using Griff Charger Grey, but obviously being extra careful. At this point I had already glued this arm onto the side of the torso, because that's just how I'm rolling these days. Who has even time for magnets at this point? I painted the balls on her head with this bluish titanium from Ammo by Mig, which is basically the color of titanium that is slightly bluish, obviously. And then I took some Sagor brown and I set about trying to paint the eyebrows on this lady. Now of course this is the kind of thing that you want to do with small little strokes, and less is kind of more in this case. You would rather build this up over time than try to paint the entire eyebrow and then be sad that you made massive caterpillars on the forehead of your model. Usually I would use Magos Purple on its own for lips, but this lady has quite a pink color to her lips, so I mixed a bit of pink with my Magos Purple, and this helped to make it obviously more pink. I then took some Magos Purple and put that into the eyes, because I've found that this is a pretty cool way of leaving some pink behind around the outside of the eyes to make him look a little bit more eye-like, I guess. I then used gold to do her little headdress, and then laid some deck tan underneath the place where the green gem is going to be, and then set about painting her eyelashes very carefully with a 5/0 brush. And this is from Expo Tools, this particular brush, and I don't know where you're going to get that if you are not in the UK, because that is a UK brand, I think. I don't really know. Don't blame me. I can't help the fact that I don't know where manufacturers are in the world. Now the eyes were pretty straightforward. After I had gotten the whites into them, it was pretty simple, as just making sure there was a sufficiently large enough dark green spot to represent the iris, and then I put a light green spot in the center of that with a black spot in the center of that, and then a little white spot just offset of that, and that's the eyes pretty much done. The next step is to add a highlight onto the hair, and I find with dark red or even like a dark brunette kind of color, using a bronze or copper, something like that, will help to really highlight the edges of your hair and make it stand out very nicely. Once I had got all that done, it was as simple as putting the hair onto this model, putting the head onto the body, and then I can call this model done. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, because if you didn't, then I would question your sanity for why you're watching in the first place. Of course, there will be instructions about that at the end of the video in case there were things you didn't like, but before we get to that, I want to say a massive thank you to my Patreons for their support over on my Patreon. By the way, there will be always a color palette, which means I take a photo, and also we have been writing down all the colors that I use for each project, and those get posted every single time I complete a project. Sometimes before, sometimes after. It just depends on how busy things are. Now, of course, we are at the end of the video, and this is the part where I have to tell you that if you didn't like anything you saw in this video, I really don't care. And if you don't like that, well then the only option you have left is to f**k off.